live in the soul booth, and let's take our places. Hi everybody. Okay.
Hi everyone.
This is a first for me.
Here we go.
I've done all sorts of live TV, but never Facebook Live before. So, I'm Nancy Regan. This is the Soul Booth, and this is David Maginley. If you've been paying attention, if you've been a subscriber and have watched other episodes of the Soul Booth, you've already met David. So you're a repeat guy.
Nice to be back.
I told you I was going to hook you and force you to come back in here, but you didn't know it was going to be this soon.
I'm really glad it is because the book is done and the launch is going to happen and the timing is perfect. Okay,
the book is ridiculously good. Like, I have been reading it, I've been devouring it. That's the way to put it. In fact, I hope an author is not insulted by this, but I've got all sorts of underlining, and I've got pages dog-eared.
What have
like
you
crazy.
done to my book?
I know, sorry.
No, it's good.
Sorry, David. It's a true compliment.
That's the highest compliment an author could have. That's lovely.
Good answer, because I kept seeing things and thinking, oh, I've got to read that to people. Yeah. I've got to just highlight that and let David talk about it. So why don't we start with, we'll start with the actual title. It's Beyond Surviving.
There's the book.
Yes. We've each got a copy, and you'll notice the tree plays a very important role in David's whole story, and I have my earrings with that same sort of tree of life. These are in homage to you. Okay, so let's do a little backtrack for those who haven't met you in the Soul Booth before.
Right.
Tell us what you do. When we did our episode, you talked about joyful service.
Right. I'm a hospital chaplain. I work in palliative care, cancer care, and intensive care. So I help people cope with cancer and the crisis of their lives, and I help them use the crisis to evolve or amplify their love, to deepen their humanity, and this, I feel, is the heart of the spiritual enterprise. That your spirituality is based a lot more in your love than it is in your belief system. Because your belief systems, even the best of them, are going to fall far short of whatever mystery is out there. And every healthy spiritual tradition, mine is a Lutheran, I'm a Lutheran pastor, every healthy spiritual tradition says love is the bottom line. God is love. So I don't want to know how much or what you believe. I want to know, how do you love, not just as an emotion, but love is the highest state of your consciousness. How are you evolving and growing into love? Let's use the crisis to grow in love.
Okay, I love that. I think it's such a beautiful way of expressing it. But I also love how it really embodies your approach as a minister. So as David mentioned, he's a Lutheran minister. But when you show up in people's hospital room or when you meet them in your office as a chaplain, because you are dealing with patients on the full spectrum, right? From diagnosis to sometimes end of life.
Yeah, or to successful, right?
Yes,
treatment.
That's where I was going. Yeah. Which is, and we're going to talk about that too, which is wonderful. But I love the idea that you meet them where they are. And one example from this book I'm going to tell you about is you talk about walking into a room and the woman says, although maybe you could tell that they would have loved help, she says, I don't think you can help us because we're Wiccan. And I'm sure it was a foregone conclusion in her mind that a Lutheran minister is not going to be of any service or want to be of any service to us if we're Wiccan. And tell us about that reaction you had.
Well, one of the unique things about hospital chaplains is we are trained to honor your spiritual tradition, whatever that is. So I also have the benefit of being trained by a variety of spiritual leaders, Buddhist, Jewish, Christian from a variety, atheist, Hindu. So I walked in, I saw her, and she said, I don't think you can help us. And I said, well, yeah, I noticed you're Wiccan, you have the five-pointed star, earth, air, fire, water, spirit. It's the pendant. And I just wanted to build a therapeutic connection, a relationship to honor and respect her her beliefs. And she goes, yeah, you know about this? And I said, yeah, that's your connection to the earth, your awareness of the energies of consciousness and how they flow through nature. And here you are with your love at the end of his life.
And it was her son, right?
It was her husband.
I'm trying to remember,
Her husband. And
right.
they had a son who was 14 years old, and he arrived a bit later on.
Right.
So she, she said, well, the conversation went on, and she said, I don't know what to do. I want to do the prayers, but I don't know if I'm allowed. So in the Wiccan tradition, you have stones of different, minerals that you place upon what would be understood as the chakras. You place them down the central core, and you have these prayers, and the belief is that some energy signature of the consciousness of the person registers in the stones, and then you can take that with you.
And you knew that going into the room.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
So I said, yeah, let's do that. And we went in and drew the curtain. I told the nurse what we're going to do, and we placed the stones, and we said the prayers, and we did some energy work and feeling his energy field. Because you do not stop at your skin, right? You're more than flesh and blood. You have an energetic anatomy as well as a physical anatomy. So I happen to be a therapeutic touch teacher. I happen to be trained in the energetic anatomy, so we did that. And then their son arrived, and her mother arrived, and it was beautiful. His maturity and wisdom, I don't want to give away the end of this story, you have to read the book, but let's just say that it was a mystical moment in which her son, well, I'll tell you, their son saw the spirit of his father immediately as he died, and his father was standing right beside and behind his mom, and he's on the other side of the bed, and he looks at her, and he just beams, and he says, Mom, I can see Dad right there with you. And I get to experience these stories and these phenomenon every month in my job.
And that's one of the things we talked about that I think a lot of people felt was moving the first time around when we spoke, that a lot of people would feel, what a depressing job you have. But, that's why we were talking about joyful service, because you were saying you get so much. It is gift to you.
It is amazing. It is as if I'm being given the wealth of this experience from the patients. And the only way you can spend that kind of currency is through gratitude.
I love that. Okay, so let's talk more about your story, because there are still people in the audience now who don't know the other side of this tale, and that is your own cancer.
Right.
Your mere 4 bouts of cancer. That's all. But that's an extraordinary thing, and I remember you saying that when you're dealing with patients and their families, they don't always know. You don't tell them you've had cancer 4 times, but often one of the nurses will tell them.
Yeah, now I went and put a book out about it, so there's no hiding.
Everybody's going to know.
Yeah.
So let's just talk a little bit about your story without too much of the medical detail, because we could easily talk till midnight.
Yes.
You know that.
Yeah.
I don't know how long Facebook Live lasts.
Well, let's assume this will go for an hour or a bit less, but if my phone rings then my signal will drop, and I encourage you, just jump over to Nancy's Facebook page and you'll be able to pick up the thing from there.
And that is at The Soul Booth. That's a Facebook tag, The Soul Booth.
Right.
So you were a kid the first time you got cancer.
I was 17, fairly fresh out of high school, and I woke up one morning and I was hemorrhaging. And so rushed to the hospital, scope found a tumor in my bladder, and that was removed surgically. It was a fairly straightforward procedure. Didn't know that it was pheochromocytoma, which creates a kind of cancer that is a time bomb and creates its own chemicals, which are activated when your adrenal gland turns on. So if I got excited or angry or upset or whatever, that could trigger the tumor.
Yeah.
Didn't know it was that kind of tumor until about 10 years later, and it recurred. And by this time I was training to be a minister. Now public speaking is, I'm told, the #1 phobia in our culture, and I knew that well because my heart would be racing every time I got up,
Right.
not realizing that I was taking my life in my hands every time I got in the pulpit.
Mm.
The adrenaline would go, trigger the tumor, boom. Countless times I would collapse.
You'd go down.
Down hard.
Yeah.
I'm 6'8". It hurts when I hit the ground. It's quite the concussion. Fortunately, I'm unconscious by the time I reach the ground. Yeah.
That's an interesting statement. Yes. So I don't feel the pain of the impact.
No,
Yeah.
the force of the blow is cushioned by my head.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So it's amazing in that way. It's amazing that you're here. Frankly,
Very
you know,
lucky to
you've
be
never had a serious head injury, and this has happened a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
And most people die immediately because when the tumor blows, you have a heart attack. Your blood pressure goes through the roof.
Right.
It's very fortunate that I'm here and survived so many times.
Mm-hmm. So when you speak to patients and their families, you come from a whole different perspective than most ministers or chaplains who would arrive in a hospital room.
Yeah. Yeah. As you said last time in our interview, I've got some street cred.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know what it's like to have chemotherapy or radiation because you can't treat my kind of cancer with that. Mm-hmm. You've got to have a bomb squad, a surgical team, go in there and diffuse this thing and take it out. A lot of people die on the operating room table. Mm-hmm. This is considered, could be the most dangerous tumor that you can operate on.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So, but I know what it's like with that word, cancer, and to live with it inside of you, and to feel its effects, and to wonder if you're going to make it. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So you go through so many emotions. Chief among them, ironically, is grief, because you're wondering, what if I die? So you go through preparatory grief, while your family and loved ones go through anticipatory grief, and those are parallel but separate courses.
I have a quote, actually, now that you say that, and it's funny, we decided not to talk ahead of time at all, because we just wanted this to be organic, but because you said that, I have page 83, The Wisdom of Grief is the chapter, and I thought this was so powerful. Preparatory grief. While others anticipate the patient's death, the one dying prepares for it. The depth of that grief is markedly different, for while we get ready to say goodbye to one person, the dying prepare to say goodbye to everyone, to everything. As ultimate as that grief is, it can often be boiled down to 4 things: concern for loved ones, fear of suffering, unfinished business, and actual death.
Right.
So, go. Tell us about that. That is huge.
Your greatest concern, if you have cancer and are contemplating death, now I want to point out that most patients do this even with a very treatable cancer, because it's that word. And you wonder, am I going to make it? And the first burden, the first ache within your heart is concern for your loved ones and the emotional suffering that they are going through and will go through after you. Mm-hmm. So that's the number one thing that consumes you. It's not your own suffering. And when you feel that, it's beautiful and profound and healthy because it speaks of your good love. Mm-hmm. Right? You have something to lose. And you care about those people that are in your life. This is spiritual health. This is a very good thing.
And you're feeling that connection.
Totally.
Profoundly.
And you're protecting your loved ones from the conversation because you don't want to look like you're giving up. Activate that sorrow because it just feels like the tears won't stop. You want to stay positive and strong for them. But this is the secret world within a person's heart when they're facing cancer, and the same thing's going on in the loved ones' hearts, but they don't want to talk about it, protect you. So then your hearts are not like this. Your hearts are like this, as beautiful as the love is. Mm-hmm. We want you on the same page.
And without being able to open up to your own experience, you can't open up to others.
Yeah. So it's ironic because you're taking treatment to fight for more moments of life, but you're avoiding the moment you're in because it's emotionally hard.
I loved it. When I read that, I thought, wow. But that's, that is universal. I mean, that can be said of a lot of people in a lot of situations, not just cancer, not just a journey like this.
Right.
And what you did say about people in this journey, they often say, "Oh, I'm fine," when they're going through that. You know, how are you? I'm fine.
Fine.
And it's not an acronym.
Yeah, well, FINE.
Yes.
Flustered, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. Oh, I'm fine.
Yeah, that's how I am most of the time. Frankly, that describes me to a T. Yeah. But that's a great lesson that all of us can take. You know, because how often do you say to someone, "How are you?" "I'm fine," and behind that mask is the
huge.
Yeah.
But the job is not to be strong and together and cool and collected and calm. The job is to be real. Mm-hmm. The assignment is to be an authentic human being. And the worry, the sadness, even the fear are part of our human journey. So be real with them, learn how to engage with the energy of them, and use them to grow in love.
And that is the journey that so many people who are diagnosed with cancer and their families go on. And you talk about this, you know, it almost naturally takes them into this spiritual journey.
Yes.
What is spirituality? Let's start with the definition.
Oh, boy.
I know, that's a good juicy one. That could take a while.
That was a hard chapter to write.
Oh, I loved it.
And I ended up coming up with my own definition because spirituality is going to be uniquely expressed by each person. There are hundreds of definitions in the research and the literature. It's such a nebulous quality. Mm-hmm. So here's mine. Spirituality is the immanent and transcendent sense of the numinous, which is privately experienced, but corporately expressed in every aspect of our humanity. What the heck is he talking about?
I had to read that a few times, I'm going to be honest, but it drew me in.
Right.
And every time I read it, I was like, wow, this is big.
Right.
So, yeah, do you want to dissect that a little bit?
Let's unpack it. So it's the immanent, so it is something you experience within yourself in consciousness, and so it's essentially private. And yet it's transcendent because it's a connection to something so much vaster than you. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the immanent and transcendent experience of the numinous. So this is a word that means mystery and wonder, but it also can mean meaning. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, it can be a God who is personal and of love, but it can also be a transcendent experience of awe. You're lying on your back looking at the Milky Way. That's a numinous experience. Mm-hmm. It makes you tiny and insignificant and yet precious and a gift. So this is huge. Rudolf Otto is a Lutheran theologian who came up with the word, and he said, the sense of the numinous is something that is both attractive and seductive, but also can destroy you because you are nothing in its presence. Mm-hmm. Wow. Humbling
to the nth degree.
Yeah. So, immanent and transcendent, sense of the numinous, mm-hmm. privately experienced, but it's revealed in every aspect of our humanity. Everything you think, feel, say, and do reveals your spirituality. Mm-hmm. Your sense of what and who I am in this world in relationship, connection, meaning. Everything is revealed through our spirituality. So most of us are unconsciously expressing in a clumsy way mm-hmm. what we're about.
Okay, I loved that you sort of, you put it into words that religion is about community and practicing a faith in a group, whereas spirituality is really about your inner life.
Yeah, religion is a corporate, systematic expression of spirituality. Mm-hmm. Right? It has a framework and handles and language, vocabulary, and that's agreed upon and shared. But personal individual spirituality is beyond the poverty of words, right? And it's best found in how you love. Mm-hmm. That's going to reveal the evolution of your soul. And none of us are good at it. None of us, well, some of us are great at it, but none of us are consistent at it.
We have our moments. Isn't that so true?
But those moments that we may look back on as failures in love are the greatest teaching moments in love.
Mm-hmm. As with so much of our life, you know?
Yeah.
The places where we really stumble are the places where we learn.
And then cancer comes along and cranks up the volume on that homework. That's why on the back of the book, you know, the tagline is, what if you could use cancer to evolve more fully into love? Don't waste the crisis. Let's do this.
And how difficult is it for you to draw people into that? You know, you talk about when people are first diagnosed, they often go through the shock and they don't absorb it, and then they don't want to believe it, and then they're angry, all those different stages of grief in a way, of dealing with it. And then you need to get them at the right time to just sort of pull them in.
I tell you, my boss does great work.
Oh.
All I have to do is tune in and listen. If I show up okay, it's going to flow. And as I said last time, I'm not really sure how I do that or how it gets done. But at time and time, it always happens. There is a window, and yes, there are awkward visits where it just goes nowhere. But most of them are just lovely and beautiful, and the wisdom we're trying to reveal is already flowing through the person. All I need to do is sit and listen and show up, and the quality of my presence will unpack the gift waiting in them.
Wow.
And the gift is their own life, their story, their love.
So that takes me to an experience I've had so often reading books or watching a movie or something, but often reading material, where I see a line, I take it in, and it's like, it's not learning, it's remembering.
Oh, yes.
You know, it's that, oh, yeah, I know that. But I don't know how I know that.
That was the coolest thing about writing, because I felt like I was remembering something.
Oh, nice.
It brought me back to myself. It evolved my consciousness. I didn't know where it was going. You know, it all started at 4 in the morning. I had a really hard case. Well, it started long before that, because my wife gave me this beautiful pen, fountain pen. She said, start writing. So I didn't. And then when I did...
Were you intimidated?
Oh, yes.
About writing it? Oh, good. I'm so glad, because that is so the case for me.
90,000 words? How can I blabber on that long?
Yeah, and then you turn on the tap, and guess what happens?
So I had this really difficult case with a very young patient, and I just woke up at 4 in the morning, and I went to the computer and I wrote it down. And I just kept doing that for 2 or 3 years, and then the book emerged. And I was so grateful to my editor, Paula Sarson. You put these pieces together. It was a jigsaw, and you put them together and helped me organize. And I'm really happy with what came out.
It's incredible, and I have no reason to endorse the product, if you will. I'm just telling you, I loved everything about this, including, for instance, okay, in preparing families for death, you talk about saying to them, look, the medicine, you said this to a patient's family, the medicine helps her feel comfortable, but your love is what makes her feel safe.
Yes.
And so you were talking about that moment where everyone was going to be around the bed when the actual transition takes place.
Right.
Yeah.
Here you are with your loved one who's on the edge of immortality or oblivion. I believe it's immortality. They're on the edge of transformation. And you're filled with pain and sorrow and grief, and you don't know how to do this, and you don't want this to happen. If I can help them realize their love will make the patient feel safe, then they, you know, when we love strong, when we love clearly, we feel courage. We come back to ourselves. We can be tender and patient with the sorrow, and we can just hold it. And when we feel deeply loved, we feel safe.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
You know, it reminds me of the idea that if you are, the gratitude practice is so powerful, because if you are focusing on gratitude, you can't feel fear, or you can't feel anger, you can't feel all those, the gratitude acts like a displacer, you know, it displaces whatever emotion is there, and it takes your attention. So in this way, love does that.
Love does that.
Love removes the fear.
So, because we're in Nova Scotia, I like to say that love or compassion keeps your keel deep in the water when the emotional storm is threatening to capsize you. You can end up using the energy of that wind, that emotional storm, to move forward faster, like a sailboat does, using the wind and balancing with the keel.
Okay, it's so funny. I had a conversation earlier today with Mom. I hosted the Children's Wish luncheon today at Il Trullo in Dartmouth, which was phenomenal. It was 100 fabulous women, and I was the MC, as I so often am. And I talked to this mom of a little girl named Gracie, who I am going to have in the soul booth, by the way. And she talked about the experience of having a baby with Down syndrome and then getting used to all of the new things in her life because of that, and then having her diagnosed with cancer.
Oh.
And how stressful that was, and that journey. But she spoke so beautifully, and she spoke at the mic. And she was a moving speaker. Because as I said to her, you know, I coach people in speaking sometimes, and what I see is that when you try to block your emotion, if you're worried about showing emotion when you're at the microphone, that's when the tears come and overwhelm you and you get choked up, you know, verklempt sort of. Whereas if you can speak in the emotion and allow the emotion to flow, then that's when it's so much easier. And I think that's sort of what you're talking about.
Yeah, and you know, Brene Brown talks about this. She says, when you're up there being vulnerable, you know, you may be shaking in your boots, but you're being real, and you feel it as vulnerability, but others see it as courage.
Yes.
As a noble quality.
Yeah.
Again, the point is to deepen your humanity, to be beautifully, radiantly, vulnerably human.
Mm-hmm. And if you can envelop, so back to that bedside, if you can envelop someone you love with that true state of love, then, you know, so they're bathing in love as they're transitioning, that is such a different way of thinking about death than so much of our society holds right now.
So 4 hours ago, that's where I was, at the bedside of somebody dying, and they were surrounded by their loving family, and it was it's the ultimate privilege and the greatest heartbreak. And I didn't need to say much. They were doing it beautifully.
So you're a witness, and you talk about this in the book, you're a witness in that role.
Yeah.
But you also said something so beautiful about that, about being the... Oh, I have to find my notes. You talk about the challenge for... Oh, there it is. Page 100, folks. If you had your books at home, you could read along.
Follow along.
Ready for this? So, in terms of David's role, he says, besides, supporting a person's grief without thinking it's going to affect you is like moving through water thinking you won't get wet. Identifying with another's distress is both the affliction of compassion and its greatest gift. There's a big star beside that one.
Yeah.
That's, so there is no poverty of words in this book. You used that expression a little bit earlier, and I thought, wow, there's no poverty of words here.
Yeah, when you do this work well, it's going to erode you.
And so how do you replenish? Do you get used to it? It's too powerful to get used to, I would think.
No, I drink.
Oh,
I'm kidding.
He's kidding.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't drink. The basics are always effective. Exercise, I'm sporadic. Talking with colleagues, sometimes I do that. Maintaining healthy relationships, always essential. But you've got to feel the wound of love. You've got to enter into the suffering. That's what compassion means. Suffer with. So it's been 17 years I've been doing this job, and when I started writing the book, I also knew this was therapy for me, and I needed to take care of myself. So I deferred 25% of my salary when I started writing the book. And the plan was, I'm going to finish this book in 4 years, I'm going to take a year off with pay, I'm going to do book tours and speak about this at conferences, but most of all, I'm just going to take care of myself.
Okay.
I'm right on schedule.
Wow.
I'm on sabbatical in September,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got several book tours, but mostly I'm just going to stay at home, eat well, exercise, meditate, do lots of photography, visit friends.
What does your boss say about this? You talked about your boss.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your boss.
Yeah. Yeah, God said, good boy, you're listening finally. He's slow, but he's pretty.
He's really smart. Okay, so let's talk about the word God.
Yeah,
even.
God.
Because, boy, in our society, you know, if you look at the statistics, I think most people believe in a God or
Right.
gods,
Right.
or some kind of deity, some kind of controlling force in the universe,
Right.
but we do not speak about it. And I'd like you to sort of talk to me about what your idea of God is, and then how that's compatible with everybody else's.
Okay, so I mentioned in our last interview that your consciousness is the only real estate you share with God.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that a great statement?
So God, to me, is a personal being of love, but that's only at one level. A level that we can be apprehended by and resonate with through our experience, but God is so much more than that. Think of God as pure consciousness, and that this reality emerges from that dimension of pure consciousness. In the Christian tradition, we talk about the mystery of the Trinity as an inherent quality of God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think of that in terms of, it's not enough for God, this consciousness, to be. It must split off from itself in order to experience itself. That's what we do too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We have multiple aspects of our personality. You must be able to reflect back on yourself to have experience.
Mm-hmm. We can be the witness to our thinking.
Right.
Step back and go, oh, look at me,
Yeah.
crazy today, you know.
But in doing that, a third entity is created.
Mm-hmm.
There's you, there's like what you actually are, and then there's the self that you separate from, and then there's a dynamic between them, the relationship. So in the church we call it the Trinity. As God creates, as God conceives, the Spirit creates, and the universe experiences.
Mm-hmm.
As
I need to hit pause so I can think about that for a while. Say that again, please.
As God creates, or as God conceives, gets an idea, the Spirit energy creates and the universe experiences.
Mm-hmm.
As your spirit conceives, your mind creates and your body experiences. In this way, you're in the image of the process of consciousness from which all reality arises. Now, we can shift our language to quantum energy, we can shift it to a theological framework. But ultimately, the labels are going to fall far short.
Well, and that's where you go back to it's about love.
It's about love.
And I think of light, you know, so often. But, I mean, there are people who, for instance, have a problem with the word God because
It's got
partly
baggage.
it does have baggage. That's a good way to put it because they've grown up in, you know, a lot of doctrine that has weighed them down and they break away from it. And I think there's a real trend, obviously, away from churches.
Yes.
And the churches are having trouble with that. I know you have thoughts on that, but we don't have time for that. That's next time. But I think about how people talk about the universe. They talk about divine presence, the great creator.
Yeah.
You know, there are so many different ways of talking about it. Are we really all talking about the same thing?
Ultimately, we are. But again, all we're doing is revealing our story. If you have trouble with a word like God, you're revealing to me a story of injury, of offense, of abuse, and that story needs to be honored and explored in order for you to achieve healing, which is simply to become whole again, to be integrated.
Wow. Yeah.
And so you need to honor the pain, you need to expose the wound and honor it in order to care for it. So all of our language, again, our spirituality is revealed in everything we say, feel, think, and do. So you have trouble with God, You're telling me a whole story about your experience with the church. If we need to put that aside, discard that word, let's use a different word, but let's just talk about the love. Because ultimately, that's the bottom line. God is love, and it's not an emotion, it's a complete state of consciousness that I believe we continue to evolve into on the other side of the veil. You do not sit on a cloud playing a harp. I think there are challenges waiting for us, adventures. That means difficult relationships, perhaps, growth and learning.
So I want to say something. It's funny, I didn't intend to say this, but the curtain behind us, I don't know if I told you that before, but I made this curtain, and it has pieces of white material from meaningful parts of my life. It has my grandmother's tablecloth. It has baby blankets from my kids. It has some of my girlfriend's clothing. Anyway, and it goes on, but it's representative of a veil, as well. So it's a curtain, and the idea that, we think this is it, and I really believe that, I went to a funeral last week of an elderly couple who died within 36 hours of each other. And the family, this big, beautiful family, was on guard, basically waiting for the death of their dad. And he was in the hospital, and they knew it was going to be about a week, and everyone was coming in from all parts. And all of a sudden, their mom died of a heart attack. She laid down for a nap, and she died of a heart attack. And theirs was a beautiful love story. They had such a connection. The kids then had to go and tell the father in the hospital. But as my beautiful friend put it, she said she felt that the mother just was beyond the veil, the other side of the veil, and she went and she whispered in her husband's ear, "Okay, we're ready to go. You can let go now. Come with me.
Let's go dance."
Oh, holy cow!
So,
it was the definition of bittersweet.
Yes, and I hear those sort of stories frequently. Patients being visited by the spirit of a loved one, patients having an out-of-body experience, patients slipping over on the other side and seeing it, coming back. Those stories are in the book.
They are, in a really powerful chapter.
Yeah. And when you think of it, a lot of people hesitate on that. Was it imagination? Was that real?
I want to talk about that, because a lot of people are skeptical, and scientists have all sorts of reasons. And you actually, I love the fact that you kind of go through every reason science will put forward for what a near-death experience is, and you kind of debunk them one by one. Do you want to do that a little? What do you say to skeptics who talk to you in person, for instance?
Well, a fundamental thing we have to keep in mind is the scientists themselves are telling us that the universe is made up of so much more than we realize. You look around you and you see within the visible spectrum of color, and you're touching solid matter. So the visible spectrum of color represents 0.04, 0.01% of reality. And beyond visible is gamma and radio and ultraviolet and all of these frequencies. Matter itself, all the atoms in the universe, make up only 4% of the universe. And then a big chunk, about 23%, is made up of something called dark matter, which they've only just now been able to notice and see the effect it has on galactic movements. And then like 72% of reality is this thing called dark energy, which is, they don't know what it is. So to base your conclusion, to base your view of reality and the soul or what you are, to base it upon 4% of reality.
Of what's known.
Of what's known. So the problem actually isn't science. Science is staggeringly wise and bringing us things, evolving us. The problem is scientism or material reductionism, right? So that reduces everything down to it's only matter, consciousness is an illusion, you die, and that's the end. I don't think so.
It's good news, isn't it, that meditation is really it's demonstrably helpful in changing the biochemistry of your body and your mind, and
Yeah,
and I think that's opening people's eyes a little bit, like, oh, really?
Because you're just using your consciousness, and it's affecting material reality. Well, that happens every day. You get anxious, you know, it causes adrenaline to be released. There's, you know, I'm going to lift my arm. There, I just did it. Non-material reality causes a change in material reality. So I explore a bit of that, and we go down the rabbit hole.
Tell us, give us maybe one story of someone who obviously you've seen this a lot, as you say.
Yeah.
You've seen a lot of commonality, would you say?
Yes.
Among the stories that you've witnessed?
A lot.
Can you tell us one? Or do you want to talk about your own?
Well, I'll tell you about my own.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about my own.
So if you're just catching up, if you're just tuning in, actually, this is David Maginley. I'm Nancy Regan. We're in the Soul Booth. And we are talking about David's beautiful book, Beyond Surviving. And David's a chaplain. This is the rewind for everybody else, who works a lot with cancer patients, but he has had cancer 4 times and had a near-death experience himself, which is really remarkably detailed in the book.
Yeah.
So why don't you give them a little preview of that, if you don't mind?
So I was in a hospital when it happened. I was a student on internship in 1988, and I was doing a service in the hospital chapel. And public speaking, of course, activated the adrenaline, triggered the tumor, and I blanked out, and I collapsed.
You picked the right place.
Yeah, because there were nurses right there.
A chapel in a hospital.
In a hospital.
If you're, yeah.
But you know, you can. The minister's always aware that someone else may lose consciousness during their sermon, but you don't think that's going to happen to you. It really scares people. But I was, of course, gone before I hit the floor, and I found myself in this place of such expansive consciousness, of such beauty and love, and I was completely
Yeah.
So the word I use is home, and that's the word that everybody uses. I was home. I was completely there and overjoyed like a kid at Christmas. It was a grassy field, and there was a hill, and I wanted to run to the top of the hill because there was a tree at the top of that hill.
There's the tree.
It's a tree. There was a tree at the top of that hill, and I knew if I got to that tree, I'd never come back here. And I wanted to see the wonder. And there was an entity beside me. I wish I'd looked at him, but I didn't. But he was a masculine figure, and he had power and compassion, and it was like I dropped into the middle of our conversation. And he said, "It's good to see you, David."
Like quite casually.
Quite casually.
Yeah.
"It's good to see you, David." And I was like, I'm home, it's so good to be here. He says, "Yeah, it's good that you're here. It's good that you're here. Things are going very well." Now, my body didn't think that at the moment, but he said, "Things are going very well. You're doing a good job. There's a lot more work to do."
Did you have a sense, while you remember, as you remember that conversation, did you have a sense of your physical, your physicality lying there in the hospital? No.
No, I knew that I was me. I had a body, but not like this. There was grass, but the light was coming from everywhere, and I could feel every blade of grass as it moved. And there was just energy and this expansive consciousness and joy infusing me. And this being, he was so wise, and he was like my best friend. Anyway, he told me I couldn't stay, and there was more work to do, and they would be with me, and they'd see me later, and I complained, and I didn't want to go, and my heart just sank, and then I was back. Now, there's more details in the book, but let me just say that coming back is the hardest part.
Yeah.
You wake up in this world, and suddenly your thoughts are so diminished, and the whole experience is descending into your subconscious, and you want to cling to it and hold on to it, and gravity is pulling you, and you're enfleshed, and it's clumsy, and it's ick.
That feeling of coming back into being a physical being.
Right.
Yeah.
And that understanding just evaporating.
Wow.
And so, like most people, I buried it, and I went home and I grieved.
Well, that's what the last line of that chapter is that really hit me. We went home where I slept and secretly mourned. And that's really a powerful thing, because as much as you talk about how much you loved your family, and you know, you were fighting, you had a child by this point, and you wanted to stick around, and yet after that, you also said when you were in that field, in the near-death experience, it was the only time you have truly worshipped.
Oh.
That was a really powerful statement, I thought.
Yeah. So our son came along later. We didn't have a child at that time.
But you were married by then.
I was married by then, and it was a good life and everything to come back for. Mm-hmm. And people who have a near-death experience hesitate in telling their loved ones, I didn't want to come back, because that would dishonor the love, right?
Wow, yeah.
But, you know, it's because you've just moved from this state of consciousness to one so expansive, and then back to this. Mm-hmm. It's hard. That's why it gets buried in your subconscious. For most adults, it takes like 5, even 10 years to totally come to the surface and be integrated. You're always questioning it. Is it real? And yet there are permanent changes. Memory, life purpose. There's a rough road on the way. Anyway, this is all in the book.
Yeah.
It's not like you come back enlightened. You don't. You come back and often are as messed up, sometimes more as before, because you're not at home in this world.
Okay, so some people, the skeptics could say, okay, that was all a hallucination.
Yeah.
What about those experiences, which I think are very common, where people, and I know there's one example in the book at least, where people actually, who are supposed to be completely unconscious and in a coma, see the situation from above, but also can see things that are going on in other rooms, and hear conversations there. They can come back and report conversations that happened in other rooms that there's no way they could have known.
So Kenneth Ring, one of the near-death experience researchers, great guy, did a fantastic study on people who were congenitally blind, so blind since birth, and they had a near-death experience and could see during the near-death experience, and were able to report color, location, objects, everything. Now, when you're blind, it doesn't mean the visual part of the apparatus in the brain is not working. Of course it is. Mm-hmm. And you just need to get the visual information into that part of the brain. You don't need to go through the eyes.
Wow.
You can remove the apparatus and go through pure consciousness. Now, this is known because now a dental plate has been designed with a sensor in it, and you wear the dental plate, and the sensor wirelessly communicates to cameras in your eye, and when you touch your tongue to the sensor plate, it picks up the optical signal, sends it to the brain through the tongue, because the body knows where the signal should go. That's optical information, and you can see. Crudely, but you can see. So why don't we just remove the apparatus of the body and go with pure consciousness? They could see.
Wow, yeah.
Countless stories. The International Association of Near-Death Studies has a huge record dating back over a century, all the records of out-of-body experience and veridical perception. So that's where they see things that can be verified afterwards that they should not be able to see.
Right. That are happening outside the space that they're in.
Outside the room. I saw my father go to the machine and he couldn't get a chocolate bar and he smashed it. And,
wow, yeah.
Whatever.
That's pretty compelling.
Pretty compelling. And in near-death experience, you're always above your body looking at it. You're not beside your body looking at it. Ketamine. Give a person, we use that painkiller, and in the hospital, that creates a distorted view of the body from the side, not from above. And the body's distorted because the hands are large and the head is large. Well, this is the cluster of nerve endings. It's like being in a sensory deprivation chamber. The whole sense of the body changes according to nerve clusters. There's no distortion in near-death experience. And the people come back rewired. With kids, often intelligence is raised. Blood pressure goes down. You look better. It's good for your skin.
Oh. I think I'll keep taking my product Bend, which is like a good oil for my skin. Thank you, but thanks for the recommendation.
Sure.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, I guess I didn't stay long enough for that effect, but
that's That's amazing.
It's amazing.
Okay, so let's talk about your chapter, Remarkable Survivors.
Yeah.
Do you want to, so often people think you deal with people who have cancer, and of course, that's not always going to end badly. There are a lot of people who do well and get better, and yet they still go through a lot of growth and often, I'm sure, are changed.
Yeah, even though the book does honestly deal with death and suffering, I don't want you to get the idea that it's all doom and gloom. Mm-hmm. More and more people are surviving, and if not being cured of cancer, being able to live with it and a normal lifespan. Mm-hmm. So, and there are exciting advances coming in technology and medicine that are going to enable many cancers to become livable, like diabetes.
Yes.
Right? It's astonishing.
That is exciting. And I found I had this revelation when I went recently with my friend who has terminal cancer to her oncologist, and I think she's probably watching right now. And we were at the oncologist, and he said, she was sort of pressing him to say, how much time do I have? Because she's full, her bones between the top of her head and the bottom of her torso are full of cancer.
Yeah.
And it's a hard place to be. It's a real, if you can imagine, it's a very strange limbo. You know that this is going to take your life eventually, but you don't know when that's going to be.
Right.
And he said, I cannot answer that question because I've had such a full spectrum of
right.
experiences with patients. But he said, I want you to understand that just because you have incurable cancer doesn't mean it's uncontrollable.
Right.
And right now we are controlling it really well. And that to me was like, wow.
And it's more important to know what kind of patient has the disease than to know what kind of disease the patient has.
Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah,
that's
profound.
The variable of consciousness cannot be measured by science and medicine, and same with faith. People say, if only I had enough faith, as if there's a dosage we can give you. Mm-hmm. No, what are the qualities of remarkable survivors? I sat with one today, mm-hmm. right? He'd been given a bone marrow transplant. It only lasted 5 months. We thought, he's not going to make it, he's not going to make it. There was even a mystical experience that, to me, said he's not going to make it, and this is in the book. But I sat with him today. That was years ago. What are the qualities? Well, first, he is able, always has been able, to hold life and death at the same time in his heart and contemplate them. It doesn't need to be black and white. You're more complicated than that. You can contemplate life and death at the same time. Thinking about death doesn't mean you're going to make it happen. Right? And clinging to life doesn't mean you're going to make it through. Mm-hmm. Hold the humanity of it, the range of it. What's the second quality? He fully participated in his treatment. He understood the treatment, the medication. He learned about his body. He asked questions. He didn't hide. Mm-hmm. Third, he exercised and ate clean. Mm-hmm. This is very important, but not emphasized enough. Lots of research shows that those who do weight training or resistance training and aerobic training do much better. Side effects are diminished, recovery is better, resilience is better, and he, an exceptional fellow, was already doing that because he had been a competitive bodybuilder. Mm-hmm. Right? So he knew how to do this, and so he ate clean. He had good, healthy relationships, good love in his life. He played and relaxed. He was creative, mm-hmm. right? He didn't grasp in desperation or distress for life. Mm-hmm. He had an equanimity about him. And he didn't know it. It didn't go to his head. So he was just one of the many people who naturally are wired for balance.
But you also talked last time about the fact that there's such a mixture. Like I have a friend, I have 2 friends right now with terminal cancer, and they're both dealing with it in such truly astounding ways, with such grace. And I would say that my male friend, who is going through it right now, he fits the description largely that you just offered us. But as you said last time, you know, no one, the human condition is that we often feel like, oh, we're not enough, we're not good enough. And the last thing we want anyone to think is, oh, sure, I can't make my cancer go away because I'm not doing those things well enough. And that's not what you're suggesting at all.
Not at all.
Right?
No.
Because, and I'm thinking of someone like him, and he, you know, that embodies him. He embodies that.
Yeah.
But there's so much. And those people who think, I brought this cancer on myself, what do you say to them?
Let's have a reality check. Like, what they're asking, what they're expressing is a sense of helplessness and being overwhelmed, and they're wondering, what can I do to affect my cancer? How did my biography become my biology? So, reality check. Cancer has exploded in our culture since the Industrial Revolution. And that's part of pollution. And we are living longer and longer. Cancer is also an experience of aging. So when people used to live, like in the 30s, now then in the 50s and the 60s, as longevity increases, you see more cancer. Mm-hmm. Now we're living longer in an increasingly toxic environment, right? With World War II unleashed over 80,000 new chemicals into the environment that were unregulated. And we don't even know what these do when they interact with each other. Two chemicals that would not be cancerous, when they combine, may become cancerous. Mm-hmm.
And we put creams on our bodies.
Oh, no,
like our skin is our largest organ, and we put all sorts of creams on our bodies that are full of chemicals.
On top of that is the astonishing accuracy needed as genes split and replicate. And there's always missing code. And the body compensates, but eventually those accumulate. The longer you live, the more they accumulate. So cancer, I don't want to... It's a strange thing, because I see cancer as part of the price we pay for civilization. Mm-hmm. At the same time, people say, well, isn't there a reason for everything? Well, yeah, because we screwed up the environment and we're living longer. No, David, I mean an ultimate cosmic reason. And here's my response. Whatever befalls us, there is no obstacle that is going to derail the agenda of divine love. The consciousness of the universe can use any crisis to help you evolve in love. So it's not like God gives you cancer. It's as if the divine consciousness can see all the variables and work with all of them and guide you in it. And so let's not ask so much, why did I get cancer? But what am I going to do with it? Mm-hmm. How am I going to use it to do my homework of love? Let's get to work.
And if you believe that, as many people do, that we come and we have a physical, we're spiritual beings and we have a physical experience on earth,
yes, to
learn a lesson, or to learn, period, do you think all those lessons are about love?
Ultimately, yes. I'm suspecting, and this is going to sound huge, and we're at 57 minutes, so why not end on an epic, profound thing, hopefully. I suspect the whole purpose of the universe is this creative expression of consciousness in which life arises and evolves over the millennium into an entity, a being like you and me, who is not only able to think and create, but love and be loved. Mm-hmm. And in that quality, we resonate with the signature of divine consciousness. And an evolutionary step is taken. Is this what causes a being to become immortal? And if that's the case, then we're not the only species. Mm-hmm. I'm not speaking of the grand universe and all the life out there. I know my dogs love me. Mm-hmm. They look like they just want food and affection, but dogs grieve. Elephants grieve, and grief is the price you pay for love, and grief is one of the most nuanced aspects of an emotionally evolved entity. So. Okay,
next time we're going to talk about grief.
Yeah.
One of the chapters is the wisdom of grief.
The wisdom of grief.
And I really found that really powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to end with this little quote from Going Home, which is chapter 19. At death, the bond of sinew and soul is broken. And that's what we've been talking about. But that, I just thought those were beautiful words that put it so succinctly and yet so profoundly. At death, the bond of sinew and soul is broken.
I remember when I heard those words in my head.
Wow.
And I put them down and I thought, who's writing this?
He said, thanks, boss.
So, the book launch.
Okay, now.
The book launch. Here's the commercial.
Housekeeping, yes.
The book launch is June 9th, so that's a week from tomorrow, a Friday night, here in Halifax at the Paul O'Regan Hall in the new downtown main library. And it starts with a public talk at 6 p.m. about coping with cancer. So you can come to that, learn about coping with cancer, and then there's a half-hour interlude, and I have music playing, I have musicians. Kevin Parks is going to be playing. He's a beautiful, fantastic pianist.
And Don Carroll.
And Dave Carroll.
Dave Carroll.
Dave Carroll's going to be there, and at 7:30 is the official start of the book launch. So you can come for at 6, stay through to 7:30, the launch. And you're going to be the MC. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and he's not just putting me on the spot right now. I've already agreed to that. No, I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah. And I think it's going to be a special night. So there will be a lot of people who just come to the book launch.
That's cool.
But if you want to come to the public lecture, I promise it'll be fabulous at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, so heads up, the library actually closes at 6, but the security guards will be there to direct you. You come through the side entrance directly into the O'Regan Hall, and then come have a seat. Dave Carroll is going to sing a beautiful song that ties in amazingly with the book. And I'm really thrilled that I'm partnered with the QE2 Foundation. So 15% of the net proceeds from the book are going directly through the QE2 Foundation to support cancer patients. And that is so close to my heart. That's what it's all about.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to say about Don Carroll, for those people out there that don't know Don and Dave, I didn't just get his name wrong. I named his brother instead because they were the Sons of Maxwell.
Right.
I don't know if I think they still play occasionally as the Sons of Maxwell, but I bet Dave's going to be there too. So you might get to meet Dave Carroll and listen to Don Carroll's song.
No, Dave Carroll singing the song. Don, come anyway. Don, come. But Dave Carroll's going to be singing the song.
I think it's time to end.
Okay.
I'm getting punch drunk, obviously.
What are we drinking here?
Thank you. No, it's just water. I promise. It's water.
Okay.
I really cannot tell you how much I love the book, and I'm going to continue to love the book because this is the kind of book that I am going to read and reread and give to a lot of people. So if I know you, there's a good chance I'm going to give you this book. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't go out and buy it. When it goes on sale on June 9th? So
it's on sale now. You can pick it up on Amazon.ca and you can grab the book. Speaking of giving, at the launch we're going to have a draw. I'm going to be giving away a photograph that represents the resilience of a cancer patient, and it's a photograph of a tree against a stone. If you go to davidmaginley.com. And Maginley is M-A-G-I-N-L-E-Y. Right. It's a bit of an odd spelling. M-A-G-I-N-L-E-Y. davidmaginley.com. Click About, and then Photography is below that. Pull that up. You're going to see my photography. And the one that we're giving away is called Resilience. You'll see the image there. I want to give this away because it's going to draw you to the event. Yes, and I'm telling you, if you go look at his photography, it's profound photography. Every image just could be a meditation. Yeah. And I remember we talked about this last time I visited you at your office in the hospital. Yeah. I said, we're going to do a whole soul booth just on David's photos and explanations. We're going to walk through your photos and do explanations of what they meant to you and how other people interpret them and how meaningful they can be. So I'm coming back to the soul booth. You're never getting away. Look, can you blame me? David Maginley, look, I'm going to now call you Dawn. David Maginley has been my guest, and I've been his because we're on both channels. And this was a first Facebook Live for both of us. Giddy up. Okay. Thanks everybody so much. And hopefully we'll see you at the Central Library in Halifax on Spring Garden Road, June 9th, which is a Friday night at 6 o'clock for the public speech. Yeah. A lecture. And then 7:30 for the book launch and the party. And there'll be cake. And there'll be cake. And lots of books. You can pick up a book then. And we're out. And we're out. We got to turn these devices off.
Cut.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Thanks for watching.